So this person is describing a situation in which they are continuously losing battles. And I am basically making the suggestion or hypothesis that you may be losing battles, but over time you will win the war. So our first post today is more empathetic and selfless people always get screwed. Rant. How do you deal with the fact that selfish, narcissistic people always end up on top? How do you deal with conflicts with people like this? I know this is a fact of life, but it frustrates me that the people who are empathetic, who genuinely try to understand others and resolve conflicts and consider others' well-being and perspective, get screwed over every single time. Because whoever is more selfless will fold first in every argument, will make sacrifices in exchange for nothing, while whoever is more self-centered and less considerate will take everything they can get with no remorse because they care less about you than their capacity to hold a grudge and be a dick in general is so much higher. When they feel attacked, even by the politest suggestion, not even an accusation, they go into fight mode and will do everything to defend themselves and attack you, with no chance of empathy until they win the argument. They will never admit they're wrong or apologize. If you get into an argument with them, based on my experience, your two choices are to try to get them to have a rational conversation from a place of compassion. Pretty much a laughable idea, has never worked. Or to out-attack them in an argument also never works because I'm unable to, and they're probably unconsciously used to getting their way. No matter how long you keep pushing forward, they will never listen and just hate you even more. They can make you feel like absolute crap even when you're in the right, but nothing you say will ever make them feel bad for hurting you because it doesn't even register to them. Even when you finally stop letting them walk all over you and set boundaries, they will see you as the villain. So you're literally fucked no matter what you do. You're guaranteed to feel awful while they get off scot-free. I believe that more empathetic people who try to have logical and rational conversations are objectively better people. But boy, do I wish sometimes I could be on the other side of things and be able to just attack someone remorselessly in arguments. My ability to hold a grudge or to be angry at someone, even who did something truly awful to me, is so low that I just get exhausted after like one day max and try to apologize because I can't handle the arguing. I want nothing more than to get these people to try to see my perspective for a couple of seconds and have a rational conversation from a place of compassion. But it's just never going to happen with this type of person. To be honest, I don't think I've ever won an argument with anyone. Edit, yes, I know this post is somewhat irrational and written in an angry, spiteful tone. I did not expect this many people to read it, but I also know I'm partly to blame and that just don't interact is the best advice. I'd do that if I could, but the situation I was thinking of while writing this is one this person forced me into, and I cannot leave or avoid them. I was frustrated because I feel powerless. They escalated things more than just a petty work dispute, and I have no choice but to engage and lose. Damn. Okay. So first thing to point out, so this person is did a good job of recognizing this is a little bit of a rant. They did a good job of recognizing that it's written in a spiteful and angry tone. That's actually totally fine, right? So I think it's totally fine to be spiteful and angry. And as long as you kind of recognize it, right? You're allowed to rant on our subreddit about whatever you want to. And thankfully, I think people here were really, really nice and offered a lot of good suggestions. So let's kind of start with this person's basic premise, which is how do you deal with the fact that selfish, narcissistic people always end up on top? So let's start with actually the question, do selfish, narcissistic people always end up on top? There's actually been research about this. I wasn't able to find a really good reference in a short time span, but there is actually a lot of research that goes into whether empathy is actually a vulnerability. And there have been studies that show that empathic people are more likely to be taken advantage of, and that it actually can screw you over. Being empathic is not a straight up advantage. It can actually be a vulnerability that can lead to a greater amount of suffering and essentially losing more often. So if you look at society, we have a spectrum of, at one end of the spectrum, we have people who are sociopaths, so completely incapable of empathy. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have people who are very, very empathic and oftentimes get taken advantage of. And so is this person's premise that the empathic people always lose? Is that premise correct? Well, I wouldn't say that they always lose, and we'll kind of get to that in a second, but I do think there's actually decent evidence that empathy can be seen as a vulnerability, and people who are more empathic than others sometimes get the short end of the stick and will get taken advantage of. So like, I think there's actually like a solid kernel of truth in this person's basic grief, which is that it sucks to be empathic and the narcissists always win. So that being said, I don't really know that it's been my experience that generally speaking, being empathic is a net positive. So the truth is that you probably want to be somewhere in the middle or be able to turn on or off empathy. You know, kind of you should be in control of your empathy and like when to be empathic and when not to be empathic. So I think that one of the trickiest things that empaths deal with, or people who are high on the empathy scale deal with, is how to effectively set boundaries. So there's a tension between compassion and setting a boundary. And so this is also where, like, you know, there's an increasing interest in the domain of EQ, which is emotional quotient, which we'll also be talking about in a couple of the other posts. So there's evidence that shows that, like, being more emotionally intelligent, which generally speaking narcissists are not very good at, can actually lead to a lot of like positive things. So the ability to understand people, the ability to, you know, understand your own emotions, recognize what you're feeling. So even this person sort of indicates the fact that, like, they kind of say in the title, I know this is a rant, I know I'm being irrational. Even that degree of understanding of your own perspective actually over time will correlate with like better outcomes in life because you know what you're feeling. Right, so let's take this on the flip side of your work colleague, apparently, who's very narcissistic, does not take feedback well, and basically proves you wrong anytime you try to make a suggestion. So if this person is not willing to accept suggestions to improve, then chances are they will be far, far less effective over time than you will. Right? So like if the person is not willing to learn from their mistakes because they have a narcissistic defense mechanism, they're just not going to get better at the rate that people who are willing to accept feedback from other people are going to get better. So they're going to stay stagnant. They may have a couple of different moves on their Pokemon, which are really strong, but their Pokemon will never evolve. On the flip side, you know, you may not have the best moves for an individual engagement, but as you continue to like take feedback from people, become self-aware, over time, you will actually win that game. So this is kind of the other thing to kind of point out, which is that you're talking about winning and losing, which I think there's a hefty amount of your own ego in there. So we'll get to that in a second. But what is this person like? What is the cost of victory? Like, what are the spoils of victory and what is the cost of victory? You may feel like this person is winning all the time because they're not willing to accept your feedback. They attack you. There may be a work situation in which they're making you look bad. All that stuff could be true. But I think that over time, this situation that you're describing is going to benefit you more than them. It may not be the situation, the person is going to, you know, I would rather take your stats than their stats. And so, you know, I know it sounds kind of weird, but like if you just look at over time, you know, the way that you evolve in this situation, the way that they evolve, like your ability to accept feedback, your ability to over time make the right moves will probably end up with you in a better place than they are. So the next thing that we're going to talk a little bit about is, you know, like this sort of idea that, let me just think about how to say this. So this person is describing a situation in which they are continuously losing battles. And I am basically making the suggestion or hypothesis that you may be losing battles, but over time you will win the war. And why is that? It's because in my experience working with narcissistic people, and I have a lot of experience working with narcissistic people, even though they may win a particular encounter, they're not happy about it. They're certainly not carefree. Because remember that like they're perceiving any kind of polite suggestion as a personal attack. So your desires to help them are actually like incredibly hurtful to them, and they're going through life with a lot of internal pain. So I don't really, I know that you have this perception that like narcissists are like carefree, but like if they were carefree, they would be able to receive like feedback without going into attack mode. right? The fact that they're so vulnerable to your attacks, which are polite suggestions that get turned into attacks, and then they go into defensive mode and attack you, actually speaks to a very, very deep insecurity, which they're trying to struggle with all the time. And instead of actually accepting the suggestions that you're making to help them, do better and then be secure because they're actually doing a better job, because they're taking your suggestions to heart, what they end up doing is like defending against your attack, not taking it, continuing to underperform below like what they could be able to, at the level at which they should be able to perform if they accepted feedback. And that then reinforces their insecurity and makes them like more like prickly when it comes to suggestions. So it's absolutely a self-defeating cycle from their perspective as well. I don't know how much consolation that is to you, because it seems like, your life kind of sucks in this situation, which I totally get. So the other thing that I kind of want to point out is like there may be plays for you to make here. So the first is that a lot of people will say that, if you're dealing with a narcissist, the best solution is to just leave. And I think that actually is a very good solution. And there are ways that you can even do that in a workplace environment that can be like really, really healthy and positive for you. So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here. The first is that I'm going to assume that you can't escape this person. The second assumption I'm going to make is that this person actually attacks you or does not accept criticism in a public way that is visible to other people that you work with. Therefore, you have the perception that this person appears more competent than you are. Okay? So let's just assume that they're fighting public battles that make you look bad and make them look competent because you can't outmaneuver them in an argument. So there's actually some interesting suggestions here as well. So this is the kind of situation where if this person is doing this with you, there's a really, really, really good chance they're doing it with other people. So if this person is narcissistic, it's kind of like, they're not just going to be narcissistic with you. They're going to be narcissistic with everyone. They're going to be competitive with everyone. And this is where we're going to be a little bit sneaky and use that against them. So this is where you be sneaky. Don't argue with them. Just start having private conversations with your fellow coworkers or even your boss and sort of point out this person's behavior to other people. You're going to kind of shit talk them. You're going to go to your boss and you're going to say, hey, I don't know if you noticed what happened in the meeting. I'm a little bit curious, what was your perception of what happened in today's meeting? And the boss may say, oh, you lost an argument. Absolutely talk shit behind their back. So, but that's not what the boss is going to say. They're going to notice that, oh, like this person, you'd be surprised at how sensitive other people are to narcissistic attacks. Like, people are not going to think that you're just losing arguments right and left. They're probably going to realize that this person is kind of like not the easiest to work with. Then you're going to go to your boss and you're going to say, yeah, so, I noticed that this person, I made this suggestion because, and this is where you need to frame things for the benefit of the company or your job. So I noticed that this person, for example, doesn't ever shred medical information. And I know that at this hospital, we are committed to protecting patient privacy, which is why I sort of suggested and even tried to point out to them that I can get them a shredder if that's a problem. I'm happy to try to make things convenient and easy for them. But they seemed to shut down the suggestion and felt very personally attacked. I'm not sure how to protect patient privacy when I'm working with someone who is so against this kind of goal and is taking things personally. Go to your boss, say this to them and say, can you please help me understand how I should work with this person? Because I'm really struggling. Go to your coworkers and you can also mention to them, hey, I'm really having difficulty working with this person. I'm curious, have you had difficulty? Do you have any suggestions? And this is really great because over time, what's going to happen is one of two things is going to happen. It's kind of a win-win here, okay? One is that they say, yeah, I really have difficulty dealing with this person too. They're a complete asshole. And then you guys laugh about that, commiserate about that. The next time that they attack you in a meeting, you're going to make eye contact with your colleague that you had the conversation with, and you're going to roll your eyes, which is going to piss off the narcissistic person because they're going to recognize that that's something that is disrespectful. And then they will attack you further. And then you're just going to be calm and say, I'm a little bit confused. Is something wrong? And the more that you remain neutral, the more that you don't engage with them, the more they're going to implode and you're just going to be sitting there. And when you get the opportunity, you're just going to make eye contact with people around the room. And if you really want to go for the sucker punch, you can, even in the middle of the meeting, turn to your boss and say, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm trying to be respectful and I haven't even said anything. And this person, like in a public meeting in front of your boss, say, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm having difficulty learning how to like communicate with this person in a professional manner. Ask your boss then and there, do you have any suggestions? Because I'd love to try to improve this situation. Publicly in the room, call attention to it if you really want to do that. And you will completely knock them flat on their feet, right? Because what does anyone say at that point? Like, what does your boss say? Does your boss say, oh yeah, this is your fault because your narcissistic colleague is going constantly on the attack? Or your narcissistic colleague is like, yeah, you should do this and you should do this and you should do this and you should do this. And then you kind of turn to them and you say, okay, thank you for the feedback. I do those things. I've spoken with you in a respectful tone. I haven't done anything to attack you. I don't know where this is coming from. And like, just the narcissistic person will implode and just let him implode. It's okay. Like, this is the key thing you've got to understand. If you've got high EQ and someone is narcissistic and can't control their reactions, you can bait them if you really want to. So you can do that, right? So like, I'm not saying that you actually do all of those things, but you should absolutely have a conversation with your boss where you think a little bit about, what your goals at this job are, how this person is making it difficult. And if you are, not only is your colleague not accepting feedback, you are openly asking for feedback. You are openly going to your boss and other people and saying, hey, I'm trying to make this situation work. Please help me. And the more that you kind of do that, like, how can you be blamed for that, right? Like, you can't really be blamed for that. And so, like, this is the kind of thing where, people think that narcissists win in these sorts of situations. And that's simply because we're never taught, like, how to play the game against narcissists. So they, like, pull you into a particular dynamic that is beneficial for them. And as long as you adopt a defeatist attitude, and we're going to kind of go here real quick, right? Because I think this is the problem. I have no choice but to engage and lose. Yeah, so like, take a page from Sun Tzu's Art of War. Like, don't fight the battle that you're going to lose. Fight the battle that you're going to win. And so that can be cultivating support from other colleagues. It can be talking to your boss. You're not trying to actually like destroy this person, right? It's not malice that I'm suggesting. It's just genuinely like, how do you work with this person? You find the other people in the office that you can positively work with, the people that find this person annoying. You talk to your boss so that you're kind of signal to your boss, hey, I'm trying to make this happen. It's totally fine. And then the other thing that you can start doing is getting into a position of leaving. And then once you may not be able to leave right away, but chances are, over time, you will have some degree of freedom, right? And this is where you may think you're not able to leave, but really what's stopping you. So I'd polish up your resume, start applying to other places. And you can also circle back with your boss after a couple months and say, hey, this like situation is really not working well for me. I'm trying to make things work with this person, and I'm not so sure that I want to stick around. And I know a lot of people will say, like, don't let your boss know like what you're thinking. There's a lot of this in the anti-work kind of subreddit movement, but I think there are good bosses out there, and you have to figure out, is your boss a good boss or not a good boss? Then circle back with your boss and just say like, hey, I don't really, I'm trying to do a good job here, but I find it very difficult to work with this person. And so, I'm not saying that, they need to go, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm like seriously considering moving on. And, just ask your boss, what do you think about that? Right? So like, let them know and just like ask for their opinion. And they say, yeah, if you're really thinking about moving on, like you should move on. And then cool. So now you understand, right? Then what you do is you tell your coworkers that you formed somewhat of an alliance with, and you can say, hey, I just wanted to let y'all know I was thinking about leaving because I have difficulty working with this person. I talked to boss about it. They thought it may be a good idea if I leave. If y'all are also interested in leaving or have thought about it, I'd love to have a conversation with you. And then you start looking for other jobs, because the truth of the matter is that narcissists drive people away. And so here's the long-term victory plan for empaths versus narcissists. In this world, there are givers and takers. And this sort of situation, you're screwed if you're a giver with a taker. But if two givers meet together, and they're able to form some kind of relationship, their relationship will be superior to two takers. So giver versus taker, taker wins, giver loses. Taker versus taker, it's kind of like even. And giver plus giver is also even, but it tends to be superior to taker plus taker. So over time, what you want to do is cultivate the right kinds of people in your life and set boundaries. And this is where, like, you may think, oh my God, the narcissist won because I left. And like, that's all ego. Like, your ego is absolutely like active here too. And if you guys want to see this, let's pretend for a moment that this person is narcissist. How do you deal with the fact that selfish narcissistic people always end up on top? This is an incredibly narcissistic question, right? Oh, like the world is rigged against me. And even though I am a good person, the rest of the world is crap. It frustrates me that the good people are the ones that get screwed, who genuinely try to understand and resolve other conflicts and consider other people's well-being, get screwed over every single time. Such a narcissistic statement. You guys get this? Right? Like, this is exactly what a narcissist would post. So, like, this is the kind of, I'm not calling this person narcissist. I don't think they are. I think this is, I think they're demonstrating a lot of good insight, which you would not see from a narcissist. So, like, this stuff over here, they're kind of acknowledging that, like, I recognize what I'm saying is rational. Narcissists don't believe that, right? They believe they are rational. And it's written in an angry, spiteful tone. I was frustrated because I feel powerless. This is not something a narcissist would say. My point is that, remember that narcissism is a defense mechanism. It is a function of the ego, and the ego arises anytime we get attacked, right? So this is all, I'm not going to go into all the detail here, but if you guys check out the Vedic psychology lecture in Dr. K's guide, you will see, like, this, all of this will be laid out. If you guys have a problem with your ego, if this happens to you, where when you feel hurt, you start to become narcissistic. If you want to understand this, it's laid out really well there, so definitely check that out. But we can definitely see the narcissistic defense even here, right? So just to kind of summarize, this is a situation where over time, if you are an empathic person, you will actually there is truth that if you are an empathic person, you will be taken advantage of by people who are narcissistic. This is absolutely true. And so over time, what you want to do is just cultivate the right kinds of relationships, learn to set healthy boundaries, right? And this is the kind of thing where, like, I'm not suggesting you engage with this person. You don't even try to make them understand, because they've demonstrated to you time and time and time again that they are not willing to listen. So you should just stop. Just go to everyone else. And then, like, over time, as you activate their narcissistic defense mechanism, you are just going to double down in terms of maneuvering around them. And then, like, the more upset they get, they may even come at you, like, hard. They may try to sabotage you or something like that. So be careful. But I think it's totally fine to, not do anything with them publicly. Just go to your different colleagues, then you can decide how sadistic you want to be and how much you want to punish them. And if you want to give in to that hungry beast inside you that feels wronged, you can roll your eyes, make contact in a public meeting, call them out, and be nothing but professional and work towards, the company's goals. And then they're gonna go insane. They're gonna explode. It's totally fine. You can do that if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it. I don't think that's accumulating some amount of negative karma, even if it's very, very satisfying. So I think that it's always better to not attack other people, even if you can demolish them, right? So, like, that's just not what I think you should do. So over time, what you want to be really careful about is cultivating the right kind of relationships. And so this particular job may not have a boss that is sympathetic to you, may not have coworkers that are sympathetic to you. This particular job may have a boss who says, oh, they're super productive, so we're going to tolerate their bad behavior, which is why you need to move firms, right? Because there are going to be places where that kind of stuff isn't tolerated. There are going to be places where bosses will fire the bad apple no matter how productive they are. And so we see this a lot. Like, I think, for example, in investment banking, there's like a heavy bias towards, like, it doesn't matter how you act, it just matters how well you work. And so you can be kind of an asshole. And there's a perception that's what all investment banks are like. The good news is that's actually changing quite rapidly. And now there are a lot of people who are starting to value, like, work-life balance and, like, positive environments. and they're attracting people and have actually far lower turnover. This is the big thing that I was working with someone very high up in an investment bank, and I was trying to like advocate for them to like create a better corporate culture. And the reason why is because their turnover is ridiculously high. Like, you guys can be signing deals right and left, but you're losing out on so many more deals because your turnover is through the roof. And the reason your turnover is through the roof is because you have a prestigious name. People come here and the nice ones leave, like the team players leave, and then you're left with a bunch of sharks. And that's why you get like problems at the lowest levels, the middle levels, and hard level. It's a shark culture. So over time, you know, I'm not saying you have to leave your job now, but I think you can definitely maneuver to dismantle this person if you really want to. And also, if the dismantling doesn't work, you move to a place where there are other people who are more like empathic and supportive. Make sense?